Hello and welcome. It is all for women's football. We are back. I promised you. I have been to Champions League University and I should effectively now know everything there is to know about the Champions League. So it's our job to disseminate that to you, the general public. Let's see if we can do it. Good evening. Welcome. I have set the bar incredibly high there with that particular introduction. So this go one of two ways. It's either going to be the best night of your life or the biggest disappointment. But we shall find out as we go. As you can see, I've assembled once again a stellar panel to help us dissect all things that are Champions League, Europa League and Ballon d'Or. So we're going to get into it very, very quickly. But just before we do, let's just check in with everyone and make sure they are all okay. We'll start off with Rob, just there below me. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm really looking forward to another Ballon d'Or debate, as I'm sure we all haven't seen enough of that already.
Well, we only do one show a week, don't we? So, when we jumped in, it's not my fault they chose to announce it on a Thursday and not a Tuesday. So blame UEFA on that one. Liberty, lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm always in a really awkward place when they announce the Ballon d'Or nominees. Last year, I was on a train trying to get to Meadow Park, and it was absolutely packed and basically couldn't move. This year, I was on a summer holiday with my family, chasing around my niece who's 5 because she wanted to play as they were announcing them. So I was trying to do both at the same time. But I'm all good now. How are you?
Absolutely delightful because I feel like in my head, at least, I understand what's going on. We'll just find out whether or not it's going to translate from the head through out of the mouth and into the ears of everybody else. But we shall see. I'm sure that between the four of us, we can do it. And of course, we've got him again. He's like a bus. You barely see them when we get him along a few times. Connor, how are you, sir?
Yeah, all good. Busy time. Believe it or not, I may as well get this out of the way now. You can see a lot of United stuff behind me. So any new viewers watching, pretty obvious which team I support. It's kind of all around the back of my head. And there's more to go up as well. But anyway, although United haven't made any increments, it's still ridiculously busy in and around the club. So, lots going on, which is kept us nice and busy. But yeah, as you said, that's twice in like a month now. I hadn't been on here for about 9 months.
It's amazing. Just making the most of the time when you're not on WFC, really, is the main idea.
Just also, for any other new viewers, his hair is always like that.
Yes. Well, it
takes a while to get it like this, Rob.
It's quite nice.
You should grow it out.
If you have a little brush.
Exactly.
Good. Right. So, what's the plan for this evening? Well, hopefully, we're going to unlock the Champions League, explain exactly what is going on in the thought processes of the people that make these decisions. I'm going to have a little talk about whether we think the structure is fit for purpose, whether or not it's going to be good going ahead. We're going to work out how it is that Sweden have just unintentionally been completely mugged off in this Champions League campaign. What I am about to tell you about Sweden has blown my tiny mind. Since the moment I found it out, it's killed me. It actually has. I've been sat here all day going, that can't be fair. That's not right. How has that happened? At what board meeting did they allow this to be ratified? It's absolutely against every possible competitive edge that you're supposed to have, but we will get to that. I'm going to try and get through today without mentioning the H word, just in case Liberty goes off on a 25-minute soliloquy. But we shall see. I'm sure they're going to get mentioned somewhere. And of course, Kucher Criminal is straight in there with it. That's the one we're trying to hold on to just for now. And then, of course, we've got a quick run through of the Ballon d'Or nominees so that we can, again, decide whether or not we're happy with that. So that's the general idea. One word answer from everybody. Rob, do you feel like you understand the Champions League and how the qualifications work?
No.
Okay, that's interesting. Liberty, do you?
I think so, but the finer details definitely don't. So I get the overall gist. And also, I don't have a Hammarby shirt on because I don't own one. And also, I support both teams. So let's get that.
So just for those counting, the Hammarby mentioned number one for the night. I have a bet on tonight. I do a bet on tonight privately.
And Connor, have you worked it out? Do you understand what's going on?
All I know is what United need to do to get there. Other than that, I've got no idea. And I hope you're going to ask about the kickoff times as well, because ridiculous. Particularly United, anyway.
Okay. Well, that is effectively where we are. So I have been lovingly today putting together the following. So we do have the ability to have a little look through. It's a PowerPoint, so Connor should be sitting again.
I feel like we're in school.
It's taken some time. It really has. So we'll have no poo-pooing of this if you don't mind. But simply put, I spent the time going through this, and I will now, in my best possible 3-minute underlining of it all, explain to you quite how it is that they've come up with the Champions League. So this is how it stands. Europe, beautiful place, of which there are 50 coefficients, and they are based on their splits from 2019 to 2024. So over 5 years and how they performed, all of the countries get ranked. Russia are obviously in 23rd place and not included. They are currently in the naughty step. So Azerbaijan this year took their place. So there are 50 countries that are being represented in that, and every one of those countries gets one team that they're allowed to put through, with the exception of, come on now, do the work, there we go, with the exception of these teams, where we have 2 teams that are allowed to come through. You might recognise these lovely little flags. We've got Czech Republic, Denmark, Iceland are there, Scotland, that'll cheer Connor up there. You've got Belarus, Ukraine, you've got Netherlands, you've got Austria, which looks like a no entry sign, and we've got Norway and Kazakhstan there. And we also have these teams which allow these countries which allow 3 teams in. So within all of that, you end up with all of your teams. Now, the first round of qualifying has already happened. There are 2 pathways. You've got the Champions pathway and you have got the League pathway. The Champions pathway, of course, are the teams that have won their domestic league. And in round 1, 21 champions from the coefficients 32 to 51 and 30. Don't ask me why 31 weren't allowed in. I spent ages trying to scratch my head working out why it was that 31 weren't allowed, why it wasn't 31 to 51 and 30. No, apparently that's not allowed. You'll find this as we go through, just random numbers. Just you're fine, mate. Don't worry, you can be in the next one. But these were the results. Basically, 21 champions were whittled down to 6. Racing Union, Spartak Miava, Ubotan, ABB Fomjet, Athens Town, and Lanchkuti, which I really enjoy saying, even if I say it wrong. Now, those 6 teams have made it through to round 2. The rest of them gone. Now, it was really mad that these guys all had to play I say all of them, teams down the left, had to play a 3rd place playoff. It makes no sense. You get nothing for coming 3rd, you get nothing for coming 2nd. Unless you're one of the 6 teams that have won, you don't go through. But as much as I joked about that on Wednesday, now it matters. This is where we are standing. On the 27th of August and the 30th of August, there'll be 7 mini tournaments taking part in the Champions pathway for round 2, made up of 22 champions from coefficients 7 to 31, but not 30 because they were in the first round. I don't know why. I can't tell you why. I can allegedly tell you the country. So Lithuania were the team that made it into that made it into the 2nd Champions pathway. It was Croatia who had to be in the first one, so that was a bit of a shame for them. Now you can see the ones in bold. They're the ones that won round 1 tournament. But basically, all of these teams will take part in mini tournaments. Teams of 4. The winners of both games. So Mura, for example, will play Spartak Miava, BIIK Shymkent, and GKS Katowice. There we go. Little Polish team here. I'm sure Liberty knows them. They will play against each other. The winners of both of those matches will obviously play off for the victory. 7 teams that win will make it through to round 3. If, however, you are a runner-up or a third place team in that mini tournament, you're still in Europe. But just not this Europe, not the proper Europe. You'll be in the brand new Europe, the Europe that looks a little bit like this, because the Europa League kicks off this year. Just because you didn't understand what was going on, first of all, in the Champions League, they thought what we'll do, make life a little bit harder for you. Let's add in the Europa League, which makes no sense either. So, 7 third place teams from the Champions path, in other words, what we have just looked at there, will enter round 1 of the Europa League, along with the 4 third place teams for the second round league pathway. We're going to be mentioning them in a minute. 6 runners up from the coefficients 18 to 24, except Russia. They're still on the naughty step. And those are the 6 teams there. And 5 third place teams from coefficients 9 to 13. Now, the sensible people from you will have noticed that between 14 and 17, just blacklisted, not allowed. Something wrong with being on 14, 17. If you are one of those countries, Belarus, Iceland, Scotland, or Kazakhstan, it's not for you. It's no way, not allowed. But if you're in those coefficients, you are. And all of the rounds are going to be 2-legged, including the final. So for them to get through. So these guys will then play a 2-legged affair, which will be drawn on the 31st of August, which is, of course, the day after the second round of qualifying has finished. Hopefully, you're with me so far. So, round 2, if you finish first, you make it through to the third round of qualifying. If you finish second, you get to sit in limbo whilst you wait for the Europa League round 1 to be over. And if you finish third, you now go into the Europa League round 1. If you finish fourth, you get your bus fare home just like you would in Bullseye, but that's your lot. No more Europe for you. Now,
can I just VAR something quickly?
You can.
You've been referring to the tournament as the Europa League. It's technically, its name is the Europa Cup. The Europa League is the men's version of the tournament. Please give it its proper name.
That doesn't sound like VAR. That sounds pernickety to me.
Exactly. Perfect for VAR, Barry.
Very, very pernickety. I don't think that's a clear and obvious error. And I'm not convinced that the referees should have been sent to the screen for that one, if I'm honest with you, Rob. But hey, sounds normal to me. So there we go. All right, in the Europa Cup. I suppose it's not a league, to be fair, so it does make sense that that's what they would call it, because they are just knockout games. So I'll give you that one, Rob. All right, you can have that. Now, finishing off the Champions pathway, those 7 teams that have won the tournaments on the 27th and 30th of August, they will go into the Champions pathway knockouts, along with 1 champion from coefficient 12. It took me a while to work out why it was coefficient 12. There seemed like other coefficients that could have had it. For example, the Netherlands, who were 9th, but they weren't allowed either. Instead, St. Pölten got it from Austria. Going forward, this will be the Europa League winner the Europa Cup winner that gets this opportunity to enter at this round, usually when they go forward. Okay. And then obviously the 4 teams that win will go into the league stage. That's only 4 teams from an original 44 champions that are going to make that through. Now, if you lose this, fear ye not, you're still in Europe. We'll come back to that in just a second, though, because as well as the Champions pathway taking place on the 27th and the 30th, we've got the league pathway. These are the teams that finish second and third that are not really champions, but somehow seem to have an easier opportunity to get through. Here you can see the 11 runners up from coefficients 8 to 17 and 6. Again, Sweden, don't know what happened to you there, but there you are, 7 were not allowed. And the 4 third place teams from coefficients 4 to 7. Those teams will all take part in some rather wonderful tournaments as well. Hammarby, said it loud there, will play along with Methodist, Man United, PSV Eindhoven. And again, same thing happens here. If you win that tournament, you're through into round 3. If you finish second, you go to limbo. If you finish third, you go into the Europa Cup round 1. What you'll notice, if your name is Glasgow City, Austria Vienna, or FC Minsk, you've got Europe. Doesn't matter now. There is no jeopardy in that whatsoever. You will be there somewhere. It's just where you're going to be. Then when you get to round 3, same thing happens. 10 teams, 4 winners from the round 2 tournaments, where you also get the 3 runners-up from Spain, Portugal and Sweden, 3 third-place teams from France, Germany and Spain. So you've got Real, Sporting, Hacken, Paris FC, Eintracht Frankfurt and Atletico Madrid. Now, this is the moment where we're going to just pause proceedings just for a moment. Liberty, I'm going to need you to help us out here, because my sources tell me that Hacken finished 2nd in the Swedish league, and Rosenborg, I believe, were the winners. But Rosenborg, as the team that won, entered at the 2nd qualifying round as champions. Hacken had miraculously, so remember I told you about St Bolton taking their place of the Europa Champions League. Well, because Arsenal won the Champions League, Hacken had miraculously been put in to the later stage. So the champions of Sweden have to play in the 2nd round of qualifying. The team that were runners-up in Sweden enter at the 3rd round of qualifying, where they are guaranteed European football. What on earth has happened here?
So I believe it will be because Häcken have a higher individual coefficients than Rosengard, because Häcken two seasons ago got to the quarterfinals. So they got out of the group stage of the main Champions League, which I believe would make their individual team coefficients on that weird list that everyone debates every year higher than Rosengard. So even though Rosengard won the league, individually they're not as good in the eyes of the coefficients of Europe. So Häcken got put over them, which is a bit backwards, but also quite understandable, because Häcken got out of the group stages, not last season, but the one before. Yeah. So I think they would have been, they were the best of the rest as such, and then they got promoted instead of the team that actually won their league. I think that is what's happened here.
It blows my mind. It blows my mind the way in which UEFA really enjoy looking back at past successes of teams rather than what the team have actually won. It's never going to work for me that the champions have gone in the 2nd qualifying round and the runners-up are in at the 3rd. If they wanted to go a little bit higher, they should have won it this year, shouldn't they? But they didn't. And there we are. That's what will happen. But those teams will play off with the other 4. The winners of those obviously make it through to the league stage. And that is when Europa League round 2 pops in. So the 11 winners of the first round, Europa Cup, I keep saying it, but it is written down there, so I'm only reading what I can see. The 4 losers from the 3rd round Champions path and the 5 losers from the 3rd round League path, that's 9 teams, they will all end up in the Europa Cup 2nd round, along with, remember that those teams in limbo that I told you about, the teams that were runners-up in the 2nd qualifying rounds. They all of a sudden get resurrected and come back into the Europa Cup round 2. And one random 3rd place side from coefficient 8, that's the Czech Republic, Slovakia. They get the opportunity to take part in the Europa Cup as well. What's not to love about this wonderful competition so far? Then, of course, you get the league phase, which is where it all becomes a lot more simple. Arsenal are obviously in it because they won the Champions League. You get the 6 champions from coefficients 1 to 6. They're listed down the left-hand side underneath Arsenal. And you've got the 2 runners-up from France and Germany, which is the top 3 teams get all of the glory. And the 9 winners from those qualifying stages get through. The first 4 teams in the league stages qualify for the quarterfinals. The remaining teams from 5 to 12 will play off against each other. If you win that game, you make it through to the quarterfinals, and if you don't, then you are out. I'm going to put this rather miraculous video that I have effectively put together there online, so you'll all get the chance to go back over this and look at it should you so wish. But it blew my mind putting this together. It really did. It's very convoluted, I think is a nice way of putting it. Do you see, Rob, longevity in the way in which they are working this system? Because, again, 44 champions, only 4 of them go through.
I think it, honestly, I sort of said it to someone, I think the worst thing in the world for it this year will be one of the teams drop out into the Europa League and win the Europa League this year, one of the bigger names ending up dropping out into that, because it then renders the entire competition totally pointless. It's a bit like this year with Chelsea men in the Conference League, them being in it and, just being expected to wallop it. It would not be good for another team to do it. I just think it's such typical UEFA, isn't it? Bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, added competition for the sake of competition. We had a perfectly good structure to it, and now we're just uprooting that. I don't really see the benefit in it in the women's game. I'll be honest, in the men's game, I think there's more of a argument for the league stage and the style of it, because there's more elite teams. But ultimately, in the women's stage, there's such disparity between them. You're going to get some really silly scorelines, I think.
I think you really will. It's going to be very, very interesting, that Europa Cup. Connor, you've been sat there nice and quiet. We've now tested your Wi-Fi. Doesn't look like you're going to freeze, but now that we talk to you, it probably will. Let us know what you're thinking. I mean, obviously, you're coming at this as the expert for Manchester United. Do you see this as a positive? That, I mean, obviously, 2 years ago, United tried to make it through, didn't, and just had to go out straight away. But do you see this as a good way for these teams to still have an opportunity to play within Europe? Or do you think it's much of a muchness and actually it's going to take a while for it to evolve into what we'd like to see?
I think it depends on where you look at it. I mean, 2 years ago, I felt United were hard done. I can't lie. I'm going to sound a bit like Mark Skinner, but I did feel like United were a little bit hard done by, pushing Chelsea for the title, finish second, and then you come up against PSG to qualify for the Champions. That felt a little bit, but first time in there, and everything else. Whereas now I'm thinking that actually it makes sense. And I think, United finishing third last season, playing the teams that were doing the second qualifying round, I think is pretty fair as well, because it gives everyone a fair chance and a run at it, if that's anything to go by. I don't really like the way it's kind of struck like a little mini tournament that you have. Obviously, that United are playing PSV, then it's very likely Hammarby in the next one. I don't particularly like that, but I don't know many other ways of doing it. I agree with Rob to a point. I think this Europa Cup thing is a good idea in principle. I mean, it's a 2-legged final for a start, which is just makes, in my opinion, makes the competition just irrelevant. And I don't want United anywhere near it, because a 2-legged final is the most absurd thing I've ever heard. So there's that. But also, I don't like the fact, I don't like it in the men's either, that you can drop out of the higher competition into another one, because then that's just unfair on the teams that are already in it. The Europa Cup ideally was set up in the women's game to give other teams a chance, because they're not going to get a good run in the Champions League or make it through. They get to the qualifiers, get knocked out most times. Now they've got a chance in a different European competition, so they can have it there for those other teams that maybe won't make it. So it's a good idea, but I don't think let's just use United as an example, beat PSV, lose to Hammarby, go straight into the Europa Cup. And I'm not being arrogant when I say this, United will probably walk the Europa Cup if that's the case. And that's not really fair on the other teams that are going into it in that respect as well. So I don't think it's a good idea. I just don't like, I don't like it, the fact it's a 2-legged final. I don't like the fact that the higher ranked teams can just drop into it because they fail. I think there should be a big element of risk. No, if you lose your qualifying round, you're out. There shouldn't be an element of, you can lose that because you're still going to be in Europe anyway. You're just dropping. No, you lose, you should be out. But in terms of the qualifying route itself, I don't know another way they can do it, to be honest, because they've got to give it fair to everyone. And this is probably, like Rob said, there's not enough elite teams to make it work in the same way that the men's do. You don't have 20, 30 teams that are kind of that can kind of compete in last stages of the Champions League. There's just not that many. So yeah, I don't think I'm not massively against it, to be honest. It's more that the Europa Cup I've got an issue with.
I mean, it's definitely one of those where I think, you consider those teams that are going to be in the third round of the league pathway. So again, you're looking at these likes of Real Madrid, Lisbon, Hacken, as you've just spoken about, Paris FC, Eintracht Frankfurt, Atletico Madrid. They are the teams, effectively, who, if Manchester United do go out in that round or the round before. Like you say, they'll walk the Europa Cup. These seem to be for teams that would stand in their way, I suppose, because I'm with you. None of the teams that I looked at in the Europa Cup, I couldn't pronounce some of them. I didn't have a clue who they were, where they were from, what they were doing. It's taken a long time to get used to that. So you could well be right. But Liberty talked about a two-legged final. Let's not forget that we're all talking about the Euros over the course of the last few weeks, and the first ever Euros did indeed have a two-legged final. We brought this up. It was England against Sweden, with Pia Sunderhaga scoring the winning penalty, and at Luton, I think I recall it saying, which is just absolutely bizarre. But yeah, that's definitely something. Do you think this is just a case of they're doing it like this at the moment in order to sort of promote it and build it up, and that we will see that change over the course of the next few years, so that you end up with a single-legged final eventually?
What I think they're doing is building the Europa Cup based on what the original Women's Cup was. You have to remember that the first time Arsenal won the Champions League, it was a two-legged final, and it was like the first leg, you get the one goal that ends up winning the whole thing, because the second leg at Meadow Park is 0-0 draw. But they still beat Ume in a two-legged final. And I want to believe that this is what UEFA are trying to replicate, that sort of early days Women's Cup, which becomes the Champions League, the Women's Champions League format, to get it to a place where it's sustainable enough on its own, like the Women's Champions League has become. Because I think that they're seeing this as an opportunity for introduction and to build something that is going to be sustainable away from the Women's Champions League. I think they want it to run as two separate competitions, the same way it now does in men's football. So I think, they're starting from what they know has been successful in the past, if you understand me. That's how the structure was before in the Champions League. So I think that's what they're trying to replicate. I think it's slightly silly because we now know the excitement of a one-legged final, and that being a neutral ground somewhere in a really beautiful city in Europe, and it having that excitement of that one moment that wins it all, whether it's Stina Baksenis' goal this year or, Alexia sealing it last year when she comes off the bench. It's those moments that have become what the Champions League is all about. So maybe having a two-legged final for the Europa Cup sort of ruins that. But I also think you have to start from somewhere. And until... This is why I'm going to disagree with everyone about the teams dropping down, because that's what used to happen in men's football. If you went out of a certain stage of the men's Champions League after the group stages, you drop down to the Europa League. My knowledge of men's football is not as good because Arsenal didn't play Champions League for a long time, and I didn't care because I only cared about Arsenal men. But I remember quite famously Barcelona dropped down to Europa League at one point, and it was like a big thing because it was like Barcelona and they dropped down. And I think that's what they're trying to do, because unfortunately people aren't going to care about the Europa Cup if big names aren't in it right now. People are fickle, and people, especially in women's football, only care about big names. So you need somebody like Manchester United, somebody with quite a big stake and claim in football for people to watch it, because if it is only teams that nobody cares about, I use that in quotation marks because there's people care about these teams, but if it is made up of teams that nobody really watches and has any true heart in, they're not going to bother turning it on. Unfortunately, that's how life works. So I think that's what they're trying to do by having teams drop down. They've got those big names that people will watch. And I think that's quite smart, because unfortunately, if nobody watched the Europa Cup and the views were terrible, they would just scrap it. Like UEFA would just not care, and it would just be scrapped altogether. So they need something to help them until it is sustainable on its own path in 5-10 years time, where they can go, you don't need to drop down anymore. The Champions League is big enough to have you there. We'll sustain on our own.
It's a very interesting one. I mean, Annie has put out there, what degree does one need in order to understand this format? And I'm afraid it's not a degree that is accessible to anybody, really, because I'm not convinced it exists. It's called the degree of common sense from the University of Life, and it is an incredibly difficult one to get. You've got it or you ain't, and it's not simple or common sense at all. Hence, it's very, very tricky. But the headlines for how it worked is there are going to be 18 teams in a league format in the in the UWCL. Now, 9 of those teams are already there. 9 teams need to be made up. They will come from 5 teams from the league pathway. Those are the teams that finish second or third. 4 teams from the champions. That's the champions of 44 different countries, I'm just going to point out. Now, just in case you weren't sure what UWCL stood for, that's the UEFA Women's Champions League. So my question for you guys is simply this one. If 5 teams are making it through and they're teams that are playing off that finish second or third, and 4 teams are making it through that are teams that won, does it not just make sense that if they want to do what Liberty's just said about trying to put big teams in, do we not just put the teams that are second or third into the Europa Cup and keep the Champions League just as champions for now? Because Liberty brings up the men's side. That's exactly how it was for a while. It was the team that finished top and won the league was in the Champions League, hence why it's got its name. And everywhere else, you would have different levels. And I think that's the thing. If you're going to try and build it up, is that not the way to do it? So do you think maybe Arsenal should have got the bye, obviously, because they won the Champions League, but should United kind of have gone straight into the Europa Cup, really, if this is what they're aiming to do?
No, I mean, I was going to mention the point you just said there. I think it depends what your definition or what you deem the Champions League should be, because as you said back in the day, the Champions League was just your champions. That's why it was called that. So if you want it as that, I wouldn't be against that either, because then it is your Champions League essentially. I'm really conflicted with this, and listening to Liberty's last point, I'm really conflicted again, because I can see both sides of it, but I'm one of those people where I don't want to see massive scorelines. So I don't want to see United come up against a team that's in a league that is maybe semi-professional or whatever else, and United go in. I'm using United in the example here because, to be honest, the way the last few weeks have gone, I expect us to be in it at this rate in a few weeks' time. So I'm using United as an example. But let's just, United come up against it and win 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever over the 2. It's just not, to me, that's not a good look, and I've never wanted to see that in any game. That's not saying that would automatically happen at everyone, but so I'm not a fan of that. However, I think when you're looking at the way it is at the moment, I don't have too much of an issue with it, to be honest. The teams that go into the Champions League now, I think are pretty. Last season's Champions League, I think, was the most balanced. I say balanced, but the most, I guess, even in the groups, because it was obviously the group stage then that it's been before. I think the season before that and the season before that, you still saw some really heavy scorelines on one-sided groups. Liberty, we are in class here, I think, because she's got her hand up now. But
you need the toilet. You should have gone before you got to school.
So, yeah, in answer to your question, I honestly wouldn't change it. I don't think it needs revamping as much. Again, I think women's football and the leaders and the people making a decision, and this isn't just in UEFA, this is we're seeing it over here in the WSL as well. They're trying to copy the men's game with some things, but then also trying to do their own thing with others, and they're kind of getting conflicted between the two in terms of should they follow the men's on this, should they then follow go their own way with women's football, and they're kind of getting caught in this weird limbo of doing both. And I don't think you can really do both. You either go your own way, make women's football its own thing and follow its own path, or fully dive in, follow the men's model, and just hope that it, works in the same way. So I don't know. I don't have the answer because I don't know which way is going to be the correct way. But that's what I think.
Is that the Champions path or the league path you want them to follow? Liberty, go on. You had something you wanted to throw back to him.
Thank you. My counter argument is this. There was a result last season in the Champions League in the group stages where the scoreline read 9-0. I would know that because it was Hammarby on the nil side. I think this argument of I don't want to see big scorelines is very fair, and I also think that is I agree, but it's not. The thing is that is obviously right. So for people who don't know, Hammarby lost 9-0 to Barcelona. That was what happened because Hammarby got a really hard group stage last year. They had Man City, Barcelona, and St. Polten. But the thing is, Hammarby lost 9-0 away in Barcelona, but then in the return leg in Stockholm, they only lost 3-0 because the thing I've always thought about the Champions League or European Cups in general is that you try your style of football from your team or your country against teams in Europe that you wouldn't get to play otherwise. Because Hammarby's style didn't work in the first leg against Barcelona. They were too open. They basically let Barcelona do whatever they want and they lost 9-0. In the second leg, they adapted really well. They were more compact. They didn't let them have it as much. So the result is literally a third of what it was. Yeah, and Barcelona versus Wolfsburg in the quarterfinals, and also Olympique Lyonnais against Bayern Munich in the quarterfinals was also big scorelines. This is unfortunately a place where I think that as much as we don't want it and we want really tight results and we want everything to be sort of as even as possible, European football has always been about learning how to adapt your style of football, the style of football you play every weekend in your league, against teams from Europe who play a completely different style. It's similar to international football in that way, is everything is constantly being about adapting. And you are going to have, no matter what, really big scorelines, even against the champions of France, against the champions of Germany. That is how it's going to happen because styles clash, and they unfortunately make for big storylines and big scorelines. That's what I meant. And that's sort of how it's going to happen until we get to a point where basically every team is as good as Barcelona, which is never going to happen because one team's always going to be better on paper because that's how you get a winner. So I think as much as I agree closer scorelines is better for the overall look of football and women's football, it isn't as easy as that. And we have seen examples of teams coming back and adapting from big scorelines like Hammarby did to then have only 3-0. I mean, the Man City games in the same group stage, away in Manchester, Hammarby lost 3-0 again, but then only lost 2-1 in Stockholm. They managed to get past Man City and they learned how to figure out how their backline works. And Ellen Vangerheim basically cut through, divides the centre backs, and she can score against Chiara Keating. Like, it's about learning to adapt. And unfortunately, there are going to be instances where teams can't adapt. They aren't going to have the time or the resources, especially if, as Connor said, they are semi-professional and they're not working together every single day. It is going to be hard for them, but that's sort of how European football's always been in my eyes. It's learning to adapt and change and not just play the style of football you play every weekend, because it's going to be different than playing league football.
Scorelines aren't a bad thing, are they? Not totally. It depends on the entirety of the game. Nobody wants to see 20-0 like we saw England do once. But you talk about these 8-2s. I watched the game last night, which was Portland against Seattle. My God, what a game that was. And 4-2 it finished. And it was just 6 goals, which you want to see. Connor, we've had this conversation before. I know you want to jump back in quickly on what Liberty said there, but I just wanted to add in with that. Do you not also think that, like, internationally, we don't see those sort of big results anymore? I can't remember the last time I saw a 20-0 or a 15-0 internationally. So do you think that they sort of need to potentially go through that little bit of pain of some potentially big scorelines in order for their quality to go up and close the gap?
Yes and no. I think that the point I wanted to quickly make was, like, obviously, I agree with what, funny enough, I actually agree with what Liberty was saying in terms of you learn for the second leg, but we're talking about the league phase next season where you're not going to have a second leg. You're playing the team once, home or away, and that is it in the league phase. Obviously, when you get into the knockout, it's 2 legs and so on. So my point was, your original question was about the qualifying and the routes into it. If you start expanding the league phase out and you start having teams going in just because they're champions for maybe leagues that are not as strong, you are going to see a big score. And if they come up against a Barcelona away, they're not going to learn anything from that because they're not going to get the flip game in their home ground because of the way that the league phase now is. That was my point essentially around this whole, because they're kind of following the men's in that respect, but they're not really following the men's fully. This is what I meant about a half and half. They're going down that route of you're going to play them once in the league and it's home or away. You don't really get a say either way in it. And you're just going to play 5/16, whatever it is, in that one. So in the knockouts, yeah, you get your 2 legs, you learn one over the other, and I think that's fair. But I think I wouldn't start looking at changing the way the qualifying works and expanding the league phase out, because then you will start seeing. And I agree, we haven't seen it as much recently because other countries are investing more and getting stronger. So it's going to get better over time, and we're certainly not seeing the 20-0s. Well, not necessarily on the bigger games these days. And you're going to get big score lines, don't get me wrong. Like, it's going to happen. I mean, Rob's going to love this. Chelsea beat United at Old Trafford 6-0. I mean, it happens. That's a Chelsea, a 6-0, I guess, better team than United. I mean, some would argue yes, but, at the time, maybe not. So I think, from that point, it's going to happen. You're going to get freak results. You're going to get sometimes teams that are just better on the day in that respect. So you're going to see it. But I just wouldn't expand the league phase out and change the qualifying routes, because I think then it is a little bit rough, I guess, for the teams, because they're just not going to, I guess, for the benefit as well, just very quickly on that, when you flip it around, let's just use Hammarby as an example, when they have the home game against Barcelona and Man City, the money that will bring in as well, because you're playing such a massive team in the women's game and everything now. That's why you see teams lower down the pyramid in the FA Cup draws, for example. They want the teams at home because of the money that then brings into them as well when they get like a Chelsea and Arsenal, a United, City, whoever, at their ground. Whereas I think this league phase kind of kills that. You don't have the return game. You just play it wherever UEFA decide you're playing that game.
For sure. His mouth was moving, but nothing came out of it, which was very, very strange. We're going to come to you in just a second, Rob. Just wanted to point out here that there's no round of 16. I don't know, maybe you didn't catch the end of my hours of research that's on there, but it is not a knockout phase. Once the league phase is over, the top 4 teams go straight through to the quarterfinals. The next 8 teams after that will have a knockout phase, and the 4 teams that win that will move into the quarterfinals as well. So not a round of 16, but there is almost like a playoff to see who joins them. Rob, Abdul puts this, it's about development, and I welcome this Europa Cup. Despite everything we're talking about, the fact that there is more opportunity for clubs across Europe ultimately has to be a good thing, right? Still can't hear you, mate. What's going on? It's because you're definitely unmuted on here.
Is this any better?
There he is.
There we go. Excellent. The headphones are finally playing the game. The only concern I do have, I think, with it, and I'd sort of addressed this earlier, is that the like in the men's side, you had the Conference League that was brought in for a similar aim. And realistically, all it's done is the teams that have ended up qualifying from it, your likes of, again, out of the 3 winners so far, you've had Chelsea, West Ham, and I think Olympiacos win it. Fiorentina make it to 2 of the finals. Real Betis make them. They're not exactly completely brand new names. And my real concern is something like a United or a Paris FC going through it and just, steamrolling my way to the final. In this first year, you kind of need it, I think, to be... I get the point about, needing eyes on it. But ultimately, I also think you shouldn't just artificially inflate it by one team being in there, because if they're in there for 1 year and they're not in there, there's no incentive for people to watch it. And there's no sudden incentive for people to come back and watch it. I think, for... Let's say, again, someone mentioned them sort of earlier, the likes of Vlasnia, for instance, that, have got through the qualifying stages a few years ago, and their reward was to get, walloped out of sight every week in the Champions League. It's probably quite good for them because their season gets extended, they get to play more games. But what I really don't want it just becoming is a bit like sort of a very much sort of like a low-grade consolation prize. Say one of the English teams drops out of it, but because they're full-time and because they've got the squad and the quality in there, they can just go through, coast through every game. I mean, I'll be honest, even when Chelsea were 1-0 down in that Conference League final, I felt zero jeopardy in the final because it was like, well, we're better than this team, we're going to turn it around. And I think that's exactly what you don't need for this competition. I mean, one thing I will say that is the one positive, I think, but again, Roma won the first Conference League, but again, it's not brand new names. It's not, because people say, it's a good chance for teams from, say, the Nordic countries, or in England's case, Eastern European teams getting through to the late stages. It's not brand new sort of ones sort of coming into it. I mean, and again, this year, if Crystal Palace is sort of now in it, again, they will be a much bigger, more financially team, much more financial clout than some of the others. And I do kind of worry it almost might create a bit of a two-tier system in some of the other leagues where the same teams consistently win the league, then drop into this European Cup, and then, do well in that, and then siphon all the money off of that as well. And that's the same, I think, at the moment with it, is that you get the same teams that get through to, say, the second qualifying round. They win the first qualifying round, get a huge wad of money, and then they can just use that to keep bankrolling themselves. And that's what, again, this is it. There's some good teams in there, I think. So, but there's some interesting names and some good teams, but I do fear it might just become a bit of a damp squib.
No, absolutely. So there we go. Hopefully, everybody is feeling like they understand what is going on, or at least got a gist of what is happening in Europe this year. Great question here from Anton. Are they putting prize money into these new trophies? I mean, yes, they are, but how much? Don't know.
I thought the prize money was, I'll be honest, I thought someone said to me the prize money for winning the Women's Europa Cup was only the equivalent of winning or getting into the group stage, I think, or the league phase of it, which is, again, the other big problem with the disparity again.
So there we go. That bit we haven't quite got to yet, but yes, could be very interesting. And teams, they don't necessarily make a lot as yet, but there are a lot more things happening now. They've got, is it Disney Plus, I think, where the game is going to be shown. So there is a little bit more investment going into it. So there we go. That is the Champions League and the Europa Cup as well. So big things going on around
Sorry,
Europe.
can I just quickly mention before you move on very quickly? Can I just quickly have a 30-second rant about why are United kicking off at 11 a.m.? I know it's 12. I know it's midday in Sweden, but 11 a.m. Are they mad? On a midweek as well. It's not even a weekend, on a Wednesday. And Hammarby have somehow sneaked their way into a 7 o'clock slot. I see, because it's in Sweden. I know what they're doing. Trying to get the evening slot to get the home fans in. And funnily enough, if United and Hammarby both win their games and play each other, it will be on Saturday, and it is in the evening. So I see what they're doing, try and get the Swedish home crowd in for the big game. But I don't think that United game is going to be very well sold for the earlier one. I could not believe my eyes when I saw that earlier. I was like, that's a early pre-match meal for the players, isn't it?
I am happy about it. I'm sorry, because we are our media night at Stevenage on that, so I thought I was going to miss that leg. Go on, Liberty.
It has to be a certain amount of time between the full time of the first game and the kickoff of the second game, because they're in the same place. So last season, when Arsenal were in the same mini tournament, the Atletico Rosenborg game was like stupidly early, and then the Arsenal Rangers game was in the evening because the Atletico Madrid Rosenborg game went to penalties, which is then when Atletico Madrid got knocked out. So you have to have the needed time for maybe penalties if your game isn't decided in 90 minutes, and then also a certain amount of time for the players to get changed, cool down, leave before the next players come in. That's why the kickoffs are so... It is very silly. It is very silly. 11 o'clock is so stupid, but it is because of the amount of time needed more so than they just were like, oh, 11 a.m., let's do that. It is... I think it should be one game on one day and the next game the next day, purely so you're not playing football at stupid times, but unfortunately they try and do it like in tight slots and it's on the same day. But yeah, it's less so randomly choosing times out of a hat and more so because of needed times in between the games than anything else.
And also, 12 o'clock is not a terrible time to be playing football, is it? It's not like we've got 12 o'clock.
No, it's because obviously the time thing. Obviously, I read it this morning. It was like obviously it's 11 a.m. It's an hour ahead, aren't they? In Stockholm. I read 11. I was like, what? Why they match? Some of them are at 9 a.m. I'm assuming they've got a few hours difference where some of those games are being played. But yeah, it's is what it is. But just mad. I've never seen an 11 a.m. kickoff on a weekday before.
No, not on a weekday. No, you're absolutely right. That is quite something right there. So, well, after all of that, we finally get the opportunity to have a quick look at the Ballon d'Or things that have come out. So we're not going to spend hours talking about these other ones beforehand, but this is, of course, the Kopa Award or the Kopa Award, one of the two. You decide how to pronounce it, and then once you've decided that is the one we are going for. But the important thing when it comes to this is that we've got some great names on this list. We've got Michelle Aguiman, obviously. She was the young player of the tournament in the Euros, which I'm still nothing against Michelle because I think she was absolutely the right choice on that one. But equally, I do feel like they just chose player of the tournament based on the two teams that were in the final because they were there, and it's easier to give them the award rather than calling somebody back whose team might have already gone home. But we've got Michelle Aguiman, Vicky Captain from Chelsea. I don't know if you've heard of that team. Claudia Ovando from Club Olympia. Linda Caicedo from Real Madrid, and Vicky Lopez from Barcelona. So your job is in 1 minute or less to discuss whether or not you think anybody was missing and who you think is going to win it. Rob.
See, and probably a once in a lifetime time on this channel, I actually really agree with all 5 of these nominees. I actually think they've got the best names on there. Vicky Lopez, phenomenal for Barcelona this season and played well for Spain. Linda Caicedo, excellent for Real Madrid and played well at Copa America. Claudia Martinez, fantastic this season for both Olympia and also for Paraguay. And again, the first ever Paraguayan to be nominated for any of the trophies. So congratulations to her. Vika Captain, it takes quite a lot when Chelsea's player of the year the previous year was probably Siaka Nuskin in the midfield, and like Captain's just come in and effectively got Nuskin to the point she wants, she's angry at her role at the club and wants to play more, and it must be annoying getting benched by an 18-year-old. So I do sympathise. And Michelle Aguiman, I mean, I think again since over the summer, had a good season on loan last year at Brighton, considering her age. I think it should be noted that, but has come in and really excelled for England and obviously been a key part in winning the Euros. So I don't think there are many other names. I think based on the fact that I looked at the criteria for how you can and can't qualify, there were a couple of names for me that were on the very edge of it, the likes of De Mornay and Beaver Jones that missed out by like a matter of days. And they'd have maybe, had stood good claims. But other than that, I think, pretty good.
Can't even saw the private message. It was too slow. So Liberty, straight to you, straight in. Same rules. 1 minute, go.
I also agree with this list. I think this is probably the best 5 youngsters in the game. I think the same as Rob, I think there are some players that have been slightly hard done by, but not because of the rules, but because of their own circumstance. I think if this list had to have come out in January, say, there are players that I genuinely believe should have been on here, like Kathin Kotamberg, who is Norwegian, plays for Hammarby. That's 16 mentions. She joined Hammarby last summer. She had a really good first half of the season with them. She directly meant that they, keeping in conversation, secured Champions League football because it was her very late winner against Sporting. No, not Sporting. Sorry. Benfica, that's the one that saw them go through to the group stages. She had a really good league season, but unfortunately year in 2025. She's been more injured, so she falls out based on more current form than anything. But other than that, I think this is a really good list, and I have no other names that I think really should be fighting against these 5. Maybe some kids out in the US, but at the same time, I think because of how the league system works, it's slightly harder for them to be nominated because they haven't had a big league campaign and then a summer of football to make their name well known like some of these kids have. But yeah, other than that, I agree with this list.
I don't think I've got anything really to add. Yeah, agree with the list. I think any of them could win it. That's probably the shortest answer I'm ever going to give you, Barry. That's literally it.
Yeah, he's never done that before. Don't quite know what to make of that one. But there we go. Excellent news. Okay, well, that is indeed that one. No, this might work. No, it doesn't. It's that way. Oh, no, it's all gone a bit wrong. Where's everything? Quick, close it down. It's all gone a bit Pete on. There we go. We'll go with this one. Sadly, I didn't have these pictures quite as well sorted as I had everything else, and so therefore it didn't quite work. But we're going to look at the Yashin Award. Now, the Yashin Award, of course, is spelt in 2 different ways, which is incredibly frustrating. I chose the way that they showed us, but there we are. We've got some big names in this one: Ann-Katrin Berger, Chiamaka Nnadozie, Daphne Van Domselaar, Katakoi, and Hannah Hampton from that small team that nobody's ever heard of before and never get nominated for anything. So, Connor, as you were so quiet on the first one, perhaps you can give us your examples on this one. No Fallon, are you disappointed?
Do you know what? I was kind of like waiting as the tweets were coming through. Like, is Fallon going to make this? Could she make it? And of course not, because these are what I'll save it really for the main Ballon d'Or thing. But these things are all about teams and how much you win, and it's rather than how good you are as an individual. I think sometimes, but I think there's probably only one real winner here. I know people are going to say Hampton. She'll probably will win it. This is going to sound so biased. Now, those people that were calling me over the Euros, anti-English and all that kind of thing, well, here you go again, you're going to get it again. I'm still not massively sold on Hampton, if I'm being totally honest. It's a little controversial take for you. I think I would like to see it for another year from her to, I guess, call her elite, like I'm seeing a lot of people doing. I don't think she's there, if I'm being totally honest. If she does it for another year in the league, for sure. But I just don't think she is quite elite yet. I'd be giving this to Ann-Katrin Berger, to be honest. I just think not the award should be off this, but as a person and a player, just one of the best, I think. But also the one thing I will take, they need to change the name of this rather than just making it the male version and adding an E on the end to make it like whatever. No, make it a female, goalkeeper, as the name.
Fair enough. Liberty.
I think similarly to other players, Fallon gets hard done by because the US haven't had a big tournament where she could really shine in the same way some of these have. Well, actually, all of these other than probably Daphne, but Daphne gets nominated purely on, I think, Arsenal's Champions League and what she quite literally did there. So I think, maybe the other name I would throw in is Fallon Tullis-Joyce if there was a big tournament where she could really shine. That's not to say she hasn't shone in her first few games for the US, because she has, but there hasn't been this big tournament buzz where she could do it the same way. I'm going to go with Connor as well. I think Ann-Katrin Berger should win this. I think consistently she has been the best goalkeeper in the world. Also, I think as much as Katakoi is also a very good goalkeeper, it's the difference in the leagues here for me. I think Ann-Katrin Berger is in a league where it's fast, it's transitional all the time. She has to be alert, whereas Katakoi plays for Barcelona. It's slightly easier for her to be able to, have the golden gloves and stuff. So I think I'm going to say Ann-Katrin Berger for consistency rather than anything else. And also, she's wicked.
See, when it came out, I initially thought I would go with Ann-Katrin Berger as well, but Rob, I assume you're going to mention here the fact that Hannah Hampton is a winner of the Euros and a treble winner. And
Yeah,
we go a little bit further forward.
Right, so I'll make this really simple here. Chelsea could easily have kept Ann-Katrin Berger. They chose not to because they saw Hannah Hampton was the future. They moved on from Ann-Katrin Berger. They've been very blessed at Chelsea to have gone from the point that we've gone from having Endler for a season, having Hedvig Lindahl, to then having a decent year of Becky Spencer, to then having the brilliance of Ann-Katrin Berger, and now Hannah Hampton. Look at Hannah Hampton's season of going in and tying the Golden Glove and her performances, particularly at the end of the season. You know, I'm going to include one of them away at United in the game to seal the title, which I know wound you up like mad, Connor, the number of great saves she made that day. Number two, I think the bounce-back ability that she showed and the fact that she's probably the one player over that performance against Barcelona that you look at and say stood up and looked like a Chelsea player that day, even in that side of performance. When you look at that scoreline and you think, bloody hell, the goalkeeper's the best player, it saved it from being double figures, and you have to remember she saved a penalty in that first leg as well. There were none of the goals in that game she was culpable for. Then you come to the Euros. Now, 2 weeks before the Euros, Mary Earps decided she doesn't want to compete and retires, and you've got her own fans booing her and saying they want another goalkeeper in there. Then she's got to perform like she does against Sweden, where England concede 2 stupid goals and she has to save them right before half-time. People forget the save against Sweden. If that had gone in, it's 3-0, it's game over, it's lights out. They come back, is instrumental in the penalty shootout. Again, against Italy, 1-0 down, instrumental, makes the save, keeps England in it, England go through and turn it around. In the final against Spain, makes a number of really good saves, then steps up in the penalty shootout and denies arguably the 2 favourites this year for the Ballon d'Or in Mariona Caldente and Aitana Bonmati. And people are seriously trying to argue with me she's not the best goalkeeper in the world at this moment in time. Like, I find this amazing. I love Ann-Katrin Berger, and it's well known I love Ann-Katrin Berger. I think she's one of the greatest stories in football. I would love to see a film made of her life. She is an utter inspiration. But you are not giving this award based on the story or the narrative around things. You are giving it based on-pitch performance and on-pitch achievement. Hannah Hampton has done an invincible season, has reached the semi-final of the other competition, and has then won the tournament, arguably being England's best player throughout the entire thing. I'm not even going to mention the footwork and the passing and the ability and the fact that, you know, it's effectively like having a midfielder in there. And the number of times she's started England attacks, the number of times she's come out and sort of, she's, you know, come out and swept. The level of confidence and the level of charisma and the level of control that she's got to. I find it, you know, Connor, I rarely disagree with you on things, but you're utterly wrong on not calling Hampton elite. I'll be completely, utterly honest. I feel like, again, this is one of the things, I've said it before, I feel this is one of the things, if she wasn't at Chelsea, she'd get more respect than she gets. But it's, again, because it's big bad Chelsea and people don't like Chelsea, they don't respect her enough.
Don't forget to also add to the fact she's got 0 depth perception as well.
Yeah, exactly that. Imagine, firstly, I'm going to say, imagine this from a Spain point of view, when you're missing penalties against somebody who's got 0 depth perception. Like, that must be there. But also, I think the sheer, like, the level of character that she's got and the level of her character that you have to go ahead, hear people who are, you know, you're arguably the best goalkeeper in English history before the tournament retires. You've got your own fans saying, I can't believe she's retired, and writing off Hannah Hampton, and then to go on and win the tournament and be the best player. And let's not forget, win the goalkeeper of the tournament. And people are seriously arguing with me she shouldn't win this. I have her as a contender. I would have her in my top 10, arguably my top 5 for the whole thing, when you're looking at the tournament. So there's my mic drop finish.
But that's my point, though. That's why I don't really rate. I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm not sure we're talking about the Ballon d'Or. This is why I don't really rate the Ballon d'Or, because it's just so much on, like, a tournament football, like the Euros, for example. It's 6-7 games in some major tournament. You can have a good tournament and still not be.
But she won the Golden Glove, Connor.
So did Fallon.
She won the Golden Glove. Well, yeah, you want to nominate Fallon for this exact reason.
No, I don't. Well, I was hoping, but I don't think she should be in there for that.
So but she should have won it, not for the Golden Glove, but for winning the actual tournament.
My point actually isn't around Hampton shouldn't be in there. I think she should be in there, but my point is more around I don't think she's elite yet. I think she probably will get there. I just don't think she's there yet. I think people. I'm
sorry, you're
far too easy.
I'm sorry, but I think That's the most I've ever disagreed with you on a football opinion. I think
We'll come back in about 6 months' time, and we'll have this conversation. I'm not hurting about it. People should maybe know my thoughts on it. It's certainly not to do with that.
This is why, Barry. This is why you should have got a Scottish person on here discussing the English Ballon d'Or nominee.
Listen, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a different opinion, whether we agree with it or.
Hey, if she performs like that for another 6 months or so, if we get to January and she's still doing it, I'll hold my hands up and say that she is. But at this moment in time, I don't believe she is.
Okay. Well, Rob, you can continue with your mic drop, because the argument here is going to be who should win the Cruyff Award for Coach of the Year. Obviously, you've got Sonia Bonpastor. We've spoken already about the treble-winning exploits of Chelsea. You've got Justine Madugu from Nigeria and Arthur Elias from Brazil. I don't feel like either of those two are going to be winning this one. You've got Serena Wiegman with England, obviously a Euros winner again. And to be fair, it's not just about England. I know it's only based over 1 year. I suppose that's the big thing to remember there, even though she has won the last 3 tournaments. And of course, Renee Slagers, who, let's be absolutely brutally honest, won something for Arsenal that nobody expected. I feel like it's between those three. Who are you picking, Rob?
Well, firstly, I'm going to say, according to Continental, you can't pick Renee Slagers because it's on one tournament. You can have a good tournament, but, didn't win the league, so you can't pick her on that logic. I personally think that, you can... I think there's a good argument to be made for Bonpastor, purely due to the fact that it was her first, coming over to England. She had to continue on from Hayes' legacy, and ultimately, bar 2 terrible games against Barcelona, if she'd have made it... I do say this to someone. I say if Chelsea had got to the final and lost 1-0 against Barcelona and had got through to the final, I think they wouldn't get anywhere near as much flack as they did for the nature of the semi-final loss. And I'll be completely honest, even if they'd lost the final again. I do think it's a little bit harsh writing off the other names on there, because they do actually have really decent achievements. I think that's the chap who won the AFCON again with Nigeria, and I think it's a record 10th title. They came back from 2-0 down in the final. So I do think that, you have to consider that. Again, tournaments doesn't count.
You've just mentioned the 10th title. It's only 1 year. It only counts from August of 20.
Yeah, but it's the 10th title for the country.
That's
overall.
Years that don't count. It's like that's the way.
Okay, well they won the AFCON. Right. Well, if we're saying none of the tournaments matter, then give it to the only person that won a league. That's fine. That's absolutely fine by me, Barry.
Rob, don't argue with me, all right? It's one thing to argue with Connor, but to argue with me, that's wrong. You know very well that I am the voice of reason on this channel, and what I'm trying to say to you is the exact same thing with Serena Wiegman. She's won a Euros, that's fabulous. As Connor's already said, it's just a few games, but you can't... People will put that on top of the fact she's already won 2 more Euros as well and got to a World Cup final, and the whole award is supposed to be for the year and not just for the whole thing. So, Rob's got a reasonable point there, Liberty, but for you, he's just written off Slagers just because he's in a bit of
my view is that Rennie Slagers, if you're talking just purely on the year, I agree with what I think we've been said in the comments. I think purely should win it on the basis of you look at where Arsenal were compared to it. But to be honest, I think that it's not... I think, to be honest, I wouldn't be shocked if it went to Serena Wiegman, because I think a lot of this weighing and this voting will be taxed quite heavily on the Euros. And I think that's why Serena Wiegman will probably win it, even though I don't think she should win it.
Okay. Liberty, who's it going to?
It has to... I don't see how it can go to anyone else but Renee. And again, they've all won things, and Sonia won 3 and stuff, but the circumstance here is the big thing that I can't get over. Yes, Sonia inherited and had to take over from Hayes, but she still inherited Emma Hayes' Chelsea, who were serial winners. It's not like she had inherited a team that were finishing 5th every season and were mid as hell. She inherited a team that had already won 4 titles in a row. She wasn't inheriting some bums. She was inheriting the best team in the league. Serena... Yeah, okay, I understand arguments for her, but also if you're going to have that argument that Serena should win it based on the Euros, you should have the exact same argument for Ellis and for Barry, what was the Nigerian manager's name? Sorry.
Justine. It was there just a second ago. I want to say it right. Justine Madugu. That's the one.
Madugu, thank you. I was not sure of his name. Thank you. If your argument for Serena is that she won the Euros, you should have that same argument for the other two, because their equivalent of the Euros in their continents is what they won in Copa America and WAFCON. I'm
about to just say something very dangerous here. And I don't think this should be the case, but ultimately, the Euros is inevitably going to get a higher precedent because there's more interest and more journalists voting from it. So inevitably, it shouldn't be.
We're not voting, so we can say based on the fact that they're all equal in terms of world rankings rather than overall.
No, I completely agree. I think if you have journalists from certain countries and you gave them those three pictures and those three names, more of them are likely to know Serena Wiegmann than any of the other names on that list, purely due to the amount of time, the longevity that she's had. And especially with the way that I know some Ballon d'Or voting works, and the fact that last year Sam Kerr managed to get votes even though she had an ACL injury. Because it was a bit...
Okay.
Yeah, no, I get your point, Rob, but I'm just saying if you're going to have that argument for Serena, you should have it for the other two. I think Renee should win it because she inherited an Arsenal team that at the time had just drawn to Everton in the most boring 0-0 of my life, lost to Chelsea, lost heavily to Bayern Munich in the first game of the Champions League group stage, had also lost to Häcken in that first leg of the first qualifier. Basically an Arsenal that was so down bad, like real bad, that they weren't even in top three. And this is Arsenal we're talking about, which are, expected to be top three at all times throughout the season. And she went on and won the Champions League. She basically rejuvenated this team. She moved players into new positions. She made Steph Catley a centre-back and basically got her Ballon d'Or nomination. She moved Mariona from the left wing into midfield, something that even Alexia Putellas has said, we didn't see that coming, but, if it's working, it's working. She essentially rejuvenated this Arsenal team, and then they win the rest of their group stage of the Champions League, including that really dramatic Bayern Munich game where they somehow, I still to this day don't know how we won that. That was the most insane game of last season for me. Then lose to Real Madrid, come back and win second leg. Lose to Lyon, come back and win second leg. And then go on to beat Barcelona, whilst also, other than two results at the end of the WSL season, was decently level, pushing for top three, other than the Chelsea game that we lost at Stamford Bridge from a late penalty, and those two last league games before the United game. And there were results in there as well that were not as good. But I think Renee, purely for the way she's rejuvenated this Arsenal team, should win it. And I'm not saying Arsenal are bums. I'm not saying they're a bad team, because they are a very good team. But the place they were in when she took over, even on an interim basis, was really bad. They were in a bad run. They didn't look like themselves. You had players looking like they were close to tears after results. After the Chelsea game, players looked like they were going to cry. It was clear the distinct gap between the manager and the players when she took over, and she's basically transformed that. So I'm not saying they were bad. They're not a bad team, but they were in a bad place, and she turned that around. I'm not saying she made magic on a team that were.
Can't argue with that. They were in Bournemouth and now they're in Emirates, so it's not that bad, really, is it? Connor, we are going to race through the final three for you, because I know you have somewhere else that you need to be. It's your own fault that we are this late, because you were late coming on and you started arguing with Rob, and you know what happens when you do that. But let's get you through this. So, in terms of Coach of the Year, you would be going for?
It's between Sonia or Renee, I think. I always look at these things like who's improved the team the most. And you would argue, I think both have. I didn't think Chelsea were going to get better, and they had obviously the Barcelona games aside. Have Chelsea got better? Well, yes, in the league they did. So you could argue for Sonia. I think you could argue for Rene. I think there's good shouts for all of them. It's tough with international things because there's only one tournament you can possibly win in a calendar year. So, or maybe two if you get like a bit of, but yeah. So it's tough for international managers. But yeah, I would go between those two.
Fair enough. And to be fair, I would also say that's part of the reason I wouldn't give it to Serena, because England were absolutely atrocious in the run up to the Euros. And
in the tournament.
Most of the tournament as well, yeah, to be fair.
Just throw that in there.
Yes, you would. Okay, we're going to throw this one out to you then, Connor. There's 5 teams to choose from there. Arsenal, Barcelona, Chelsea, Lyon and Orlando Pride. Which one of those 5 gets it for you?
Again, I think you got to go same kind of answer for what I just said for the coach one, which has improved the most. The team that surprised me the most is Arsenal, because I didn't back them to to win the semi-final or the final, and they did both. So I think you would maybe go off them, and I think not just that. I think off the pitch, I think they're certainly leaders in the way that they market the team and their attendances speak for themselves and everything else. So I think from that point of view, they're ahead in terms of club of the year if you want to take all that into account. But then Chelsea, invincible treble. I feel like I'm saying the same answer for the coach one, but I think it's between probably those two, because in England, certainly they're leaders. Barca have not really got better than what we've seen in recent years. And Lyon and Orlando Pride there as well. I think it's between the two English sides, to be honest.
I do think that Club of the Year and Coach of the Year are pretty much intertwined, if we're being brutally honest there. But there we go. And of course, we are going to go to Club of the Year for the other two as well, but just to give you a chance to be able to drop off and go and do your next bit of recording. 30 names on the Ballon d'Or list.
Oh, yes.
There was quite a few, but I'm assuming you've had time to consume the list. Who, in your opinion, will walk away with the Ballon d'Or?
Well, I've got 3 points to make on this. The first one is someone is missing, and that's Kim Little. I am telling you now, if she's English, she makes this list, and that's not even me joking. She would.
Very important to get that name right as well, Kim Little, because Little Kim is a very different thing altogether.
So she should be on there. And I say this, I mean, if people just watch and say Scottish Bass or whatever else, take Caroline Weir out then and put Kim Little in there, because Kim Little should be in there, regardless of whatever country or whatever else. It's amazing to me that she has not made that list. The rest of them, these kind of awards are always tricky because they're kind of opinion-based for them, I guess, for the most part. There's a few that you think are shoo-ins. I think it's good to see a couple of Italians in there as well. I think that's deserved from their point of view. Who do I think will win it? I think I've got two answers for this. There's a player in there I don't think should be, and there's a couple in there that maybe shouldn't be. But I think in terms of who wins it, it's probably going to be Bonmati or Pateas, if I'm being honest. I'm siding more towards Pateas. I think Russo has got a shout, a pretty good shout as well. So it's probably between those three, if I'm being honest. I think the top three is probably going to look something like Bonmati, Pateas, and Russo. Not in that order. I'd probably put Pateas and Bonmati around. Just looking at the list now, who else has got kind of outside shouts? Maybe you're looking at Leah Williamson as well as maybe got a shout at kind of being in and around there. Just because these awards are so heavily weighted on what you win with the team. And Arsenal obviously won the Champions League, and the Lionesses with Arsenal won the Euros as well. So I think that's why those two in particular have got a really good shout. But I don't really know who I would want to see win it, to be honest. I think Caldentis, someone's just mentioned in the chat there, was exceptional, last season as well, and for most parts in the tournament as well. So I think it's a tough one. I would like to see someone different win it that's not like your big Spanish names, or somebody who goes kind of under the radar a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of the point. I know I'm fencing it. Pateas will probably win it, but it shouldn't be, I don't think.
Very good. Okay, well, there we go. Well, I know you need to dip out now because you're going to record another pod. So, yeah, good luck for that.
Nice.
Thank you very much. And cheers for popping on, and we will see you again sometime soon, I am sure. Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you. Hopefully it's not going to be hugely long because we're almost done. But we do need to throw out those questions to you guys as well. And as Connor just said, I think when you start looking at the Club of the Year, they are almost intrinsically linked, aren't they? I know that the Lyon manager wasn't there, and neither was the Pride manager or really the Barcelona manager. But the same argument that you use for Coach of the Year has to apply to Arsenal and Chelsea for Team of the Year, right? So the question has to be...
Can I throw...
Let me finish what I was saying first, though, so that you've got the full question. Otherwise, it doesn't quite work. What I was going to say is, if you've picked Chelsea or Arsenal, presumably it's got to be that one of the other three teams has had a better season than the coach that you have chosen. Now I'm ready. Go on, off you go, Rob. Crack on.
I have to say, if you're talking in terms of coaches, I think Seb Hines was really, really unlucky to be snubbed for Coach of the Year. I think, firstly, to look at where the Pride were, and they were, renowned as a bit of a joke, in all honesty, and renowned as a bit of, one of those teams that's sort of the butt of all the jokes in the end of itself, to do as well as they've done and win both the Shield and win the Championship in the same season as Immense. I think he's a fantastic role model and a great, trailblazer for young black coaches, and especially going abroad, having cut his teeth in England as a player, going abroad, and I'm no doubt at some point he will come back and manage in England, and I think do very, very well. I think they're second at the moment in the NWSL this season. So, again, they're following up on this. I think that you actually can make a strong argument for them for being Club of the Year, considering where they were and considering where they've come from. For me, almost Club of the Year is almost where you were to where you came from. Arsenal did very, very well to win the Champions League, but ultimately, if you'll talk about the whole year, they were a mess at the beginning of the year. Chelsea had a very good year overall, but ultimately the foundations are already there. Barcelona getting schooled every week. I mean,
I don't think that's the case. I mean, like you say, they're second in the league.
They're second. They're a long way behind KC current, but at the same time, there are, that doesn't still mean they won't go and win the playoffs because NWSL things. Barcelona, to be honest, to Barcelona, due to the nature of the dominance they have domestically, they're expected to do it. Similar to OL Lyon, as we now have to call them. So if they don't win everything, it's kind of a bit of an inquest anyway. I think if Barcelona had won the Champions League, they probably would win this. But I don't think you can give it to them, because ultimately that's what they should get judged on, and they didn't win it. So I would give it to Orlando Pride for where they've come from to where they are. Similar to, again, OL Lyon, they've been winning the years for, winning domestically for years and years. It's not as if it's new. Whereas the Pride, I think it was their first proper NWSL title.
Yeah, I believe it was as well. Listen, the Pride are... There seems to be some backlash on that from Couture there, but as I say, they're not necessarily at the level that KC current are. But let's be clear, you don't need to be top of the league to win the NWSL. You just need to be in that final game of the season. So we shall see. But there we go. That's Rob's opinion. Liberty, for you, are you going to go all in for Arsenal being Club of the Year as well, or have you got another side there?
I'm going to agree with Rob. I think it should go to the Orlando Pride. But I have some things to say about this, because the criteria I'm about to say for the Pride should also exist elsewhere in other leagues and other teams. So it's slightly contuitive of what I'm about to say. But the Orlando Pride in the regular season of the NWSL, for people that don't know, they play a league season where they play every team twice, and then it goes to a playoff. Are people not happy that I've said the Pride? I'm sorry, but that's my opinion. Then they were going to the playoff. They won every game bar one of the regular season games. Ironically, the only game they lost was the week after they'd already secured the league title against the Portland Thorns, which is just a bit ironic. But they won all but one of their regular season games. So here's my thing of this criteria should exist for other teams as well. Rosengard did the exact same thing in the Damallsvenskan, but they do not get a nomination. If that's my criteria for why Orlando Pride should win, it should also happen to the Rosengard, because they won all but one of their league games last season. They only lost one game against a team called Hammarby. Does anyone know those guys? So if I'm saying that is my criteria, thank you, 17, then that should also exist for Rosengard, but they aren't here. So it's slightly hard, but I do think the Orlando Pride should win it because they won all but one of their games in a league where they were not expected to do anything really. If we're being truthfully honest, you know, in the NWSL, you're looking at Portland Thorns, you're looking at Seattle Reign, you're looking at Gotham, to kind of not dominate because that's not how the league really works over there, but for them to do really well and to one of those to win the regular season and then do really well in the playoffs. And Pride sort of took everyone by surprise. The season before, they finished last. This isn't a team that were, you know, mid-table, pushing for playoffs. They were really bad. And Seb Hines really turned them around. You know, it's a team that Marta had been there for 7 years and not won a single trophy. She was part of the first Pride team when they were an expansion team 8 years ago now, and she had not won anything. This is Marta we're talking about. They didn't have bad talent. They just had, you know, this is a team that had Alex Morgan at one point, now Ballon d'Or nominee Steph Catley at one point, right at the beginning. You know, this isn't a team that was sort of created just to make up numbers. They were a team that were trying to push for more. And Seb Hines really turned them around and did that. And they were really excellent in the league last season, more so than I would say, more consistently good than Chelsea. And the argument is, well, Chelsea didn't lose a single game. That is very true. And that should be more of a case of what I'm saying. They only lost one game. But the thing is, unfortunately, quite a few of Chelsea's games after Christmas, in my opinion, were really bad from Chelsea. They were not in the league. Let me clarify, in the WSL. They were not themselves at all. I don't think they had a particularly strong WSL second half of the season. And so based on consistency across the season, for me, it should go to the Pride. And yes, Arsenal developed more, but also their development in the Champions League, was really good, but it didn't result in anything in the league or any other trophies. And as much as they won the Champions League, that is brilliant. That is best trophy around, but it didn't materialize elsewhere. You know, still lost both games to Chelsea last season. Went out in the Conti Cup, Subway Cup, semi-finals. Didn't get very far in. Sorry, I don't really know what's going on. Didn't get very far in the FA Cup, whereas the Pride were consistently good, and then when they got to the playoffs, they went up another gear and went on to win their second trophy. I think it should go to the Pride.
Okie dokie. Well, listen, it's great. To be fair, you know, it's all about opinions, and that is what is going on at the moment. So at the moment, we've got obviously Couture Criminal, who is a Chelsea fan, unsurprisingly saying that Chelsea should win Club of the Year. Sorry, we've covered you up down there, Rob, but needs must for this one. Basically saying that if they were in the NWSL, they would absolutely walk it. Couture supports racing at Louisville over in America. And I just think at this sort of point it's quite important, you know, at most points in WSL history, no losses, what more should they do? I think this is where it's a worldwide award, but it's European delivered. And so when I spoke to Rob earlier and I was chastising him for you can't pick the Nigerian manager because of 9 years worth of brilliance beforehand. The criteria is, as we say, from sort of July or August to July or August. And of course, the NWSL season starts in March. So it's a lot of what we would be praising Pride for there would be for basically March to sort of December of 2024. 2025, it's obviously not really going to include 3 months because they have their time when they're not playing. And then it's back to this one where they are currently second. Whereas you're looking at Arsenal and Chelsea and Barca and Lyon, to be fair, and their leagues run much more concurrently with the window in which people can choose their winners. So I do think that's quite an important distinction to make as well if you are genuinely looking at, you know, who is the best team, person, whatever, from this date to that date. And with that in mind, that is why, you know, for me personally, I would be giving Coach of the Year to Slagers. I think that is just an absolutely unbelievable achievement to take Arsenal to Champions League. If you'd have told me last July that Arsenal were going to win the Champions League, I would have laughed squarely in your face and called you a fool. And yet they went on to do it. So I feel like that is the case. If you'd have told me that Chelsea would just win everything except the Champions League, I'd have gone, well, what's new? So there's no real surprise for me on that one. But as much as I've said all of this about Couture and Chelsea being who they are, I also think you can't argue with, we're talking about an invincible side there in Pride with the most WSL points and all of these sorts of things. But Chelsea have done a very similar thing in England. You know, their performances may not have been great in some of those games, but they did go on to absolutely boss the WSL. They won the League Cup, they won the FA Cup, and they've done all of those things. So I think if it were me, I probably would vote for Chelsea. But then again, I think a lot of that does also come down to not really knowing a huge amount about the NWSL prior to this season when I've really started taking interest in it. So I think these sorts of things will go into it. But I think, yeah, if you were picking, there's an argument for Pride, there's an argument for Chelsea for sure on those ones. But it's good to see people with opinions. That's lovely. That's what we want. It's a good thing. And speaking of opinions, we're down to our very last one, which is who is going to be the Ballon d'Or winner. Now, I need to apologise because on here I've written down Lindsay Horan, and it is, of course, Lindsay Heaps, even though she was Lindsay Horan for the entirety of the French league because they wouldn't allow name changes. So I was suitably castigated for that. But I would also blame UEFA for that because I was watching their stream and they wrote that name down and I was just merrily typing these names down. I didn't go back and check because why would I? I'm trying to get stuff out on time. Unlucky. Anyway, Rob, there are 30 names here. It's a lot to choose from. Are you generally happy? Because speaking to Freya, you know, she was quite content with some of the names in there. It's a very different sort of list. Are you happy? Who would you give it to?
I mean, there are some names in there that, quite frankly, I think have very little reason to be there. There are a few of them, I think, that are there purely on the nature of their team doing well or the fact that they've done well in recent weeks. Like, Joanna Rittenkannerud, I'll say from a Chelsea point of view, was good in the first half of the season, but pretty awful from December onwards, and a lack of end product. I'll be honest, I think Arsenal did well this season, but I'm not really sure that Frida Marnham has, you know, again, when you're looking at, like, you know, Kim Little not being there, but Frida Marnham being there, it kind of boggles. Besides that, the majority of that, I mean, I'm pleased to see Ava Payol get a nomination, and again, I'm surprised she isn't getting more. Like, I think she had 72 goals and assists last year for club and country. Like, I mean, I find that nuts that we're talking about those numbers and yet people aren't even including her in their top tens. Obviously, for like the millionth year in a row, Lucy Bronze gets a Ballon d'Or nomination. I'm sure it just seems to be a thing every single year. They just start off the nominations and then just put her name down. Marta being there. Part of me would love to see Marta get it for all the Orlando Pride success and also for just being utterly clutch in the Copa America final. Like, I mean, to be losing the final and then just decide to do that with, like, the last kick of the game and just be like, you know, F it, I'm Marta. Like, that is something I'm quite impressed at. It's hard. I think personally, My concern is I think this has become more of a publicity award and a popularity award rather than giving it to the best player. And I fear that might be what happens this year, where because there's a lot of publicity around Alexia and Aitana Bonmatí, and don't get me wrong, they are phenomenal players, but I fear they may win it less on their footballing ability and more on their ability to get positive PR out there. Now, if you ask me of that Spanish side, which player I'd give it to, it's the player who, during their 2 off games, Spain and Barcelona haven't won, in Patrick Guerrero. Because she had not her best game in the Euros final, Spain did not win, and she had not her best game in that Champions League final, Barcelona did not win. But I fear it will probably go to one of Alexia or Aitana. Toss up between the two of them. Personally, I'd give it to Alexia, just the way she's come back. Again, someone mentions their 10-word Chowinga. I mean, you can't ignore her on the list as well. I think she's been brilliant. I think it's great to see Christina Girelli in there after, a lot of time, I think, of people not giving her and not giving Italian football the credit it deserves. I do have to say, again, I'll also include CGH and Pernilla Harder, wonderful world-class players, but I don't think their seasons have been on the same level that you'd expect from them. I mean, Harder, the problem with Harder is my expectations are enormous for her, and similar with Graham Hansen. I mean, I'm going to have a look at Graham Hansen's stats, but again, neither really turned up for their country in the summer. And I think that's the big thing. I'm like, only 11 goals and 7 assists last year in the qualifying. What did Barcelona? Only 3 goals in the Champions League and only 11 goals and 10 assists in the league. I mean, they're nuts numbers for most players, but for Graham Hansen, that's a poor season. So I do think that I do think that there's some strange selections in there. Again, I made my argument earlier for Hannah Hampton. I've already tried to push that. I think it's really unlucky if she's not in the top 10, if I'm completely honest. But other than that, generally quite happy.
I mean, it's interesting, Liberty, when we throw this over to you, I suppose the thing with this is that whoever wins it, there's 29 other players below. And what we're really saying is that these are supposed to be the best 30 players in the world. Doesn't necessarily mean that the person that finishes 30th was even remotely close to winning the thing. But with that in mind, would you say that this is the top 30 players in the world?
The best 25, maybe a couple more. I overall think this is a really good list, and other than nitpicking some of these players, I'm decently happy with it. My counter argument to some of what Rob's just said, Pernilla Harder had a really good season for Bayern Munich, and I understand the argument that most of it's going to be based on the Euros, and I think that's really wrong, and I completely understand and see how that is, but it's not just the Euros, and she's not just been nominated because of Denmark's performances. Same with Frida Maanum. I'm so happy Frida Maanum has a nomination, because she may not. I think Frida Maanum gets a lot of slack, especially for Arsenal, because a lot of people think she should be scoring loads of goals and should be this big goal threat when she's not. That's never been who Frida Maanum is. But on a weekly basis, she is one of Arsenal's most consistent players. She's always turning up and she's doing sort of work that people don't really see as often. And I'm really happy she has this nomination, because I do think she had a really good season. I'm really happy that Clara Mateo for Paris FC has got a nomination, because of her stats from last season were nuts. I agree some players shouldn't be nominated. Joanna Erting-Kaneryd, I sort of went, really? It feels like she got nominated because she was very good for Sweden instead of anything else, because of how they wanted her to run down that wing. I don't know how Lindsay Heaps has a nomination once again, because the USA haven't had these big games where she can really show off, and she didn't really even do it last year at the Olympics anyway. And I still don't really see or think she is particularly good for Lyon. But then on that same note, Lucy Bronze is nominated purely because, one, her name is Lucy Bronze, and also she had a really good Euros, and that is undeniable. Caroline Graham Hansen, I'm also a bit like, I don't really know how you've got nominated, because she didn't have a very good season overall, not by her standards anyway. But to answer the question of who I think should win this, as Rob said, she had 71 goal contributions across all competitions for club and country last year. If you aren't saying that Eva Payol has to win this, I don't really see who else. She scored 43 goals in 46 appearances for Barcelona. She won essentially the domestic treble. The thing with Eva is always going to be she's Polish, and that isn't a big country in the same way that Spain and England are. So her name will never be as high up as others, despite the numbers she's putting down, because we got knocked out in the group stages, even though we had a really hard group stages. But people always think of Eva as this player that scores lots, and that is true. But they forget that actually, when it comes to Poland, she's doing more of the dirty work that she doesn't have to do for her club, whether that was Wolfsburg or whether that becomes Barcelona. No, but if Alexia was putting down the numbers that Eva put down last season, I think I'm pissing people off in the comments today, and I really don't mind, because if Alexia Putellas was making 71 goal contributions across the season for both club and country, there would be no question at all on people's lips who should win it. But because it's Eva and she plays for a club that seems to wash the league and a country that isn't, she is Poland's best player. I'm sorry, she is. She's the best women's Polish player ever. Don't try and argue with me. She's not Poland's best player. She is. And if your only experience of watching Poland was Euros, you are wrong, my mate. Anyway, if somebody else is putting down the numbers that Eva put down, there would be no debate who should win this. This is the best striker in the world, potentially the last 5 years, maybe more, in my opinion. Her numbers are incredible. She has slotted into a completely different style at Barcelona like nobody's business. She's gone from Wolfsburg's counter-attacking style to tiki-taka, all the possession at Barcelona, which is completely different. And she has come in like an absolute house on fire. And I think she should win this. She won't. It will go to Alexia. I'd eat my hat if it doesn't go to Alexia. But it should go to Eva. That 100%. Once again, I'm gonna say it one more time. Just because if anyone else, forget Alexia. If Alessia Russo was putting down Eva's numbers, there'd be no debate of who we think should win this. It's got to be Payol for me.
It's an interesting one. I mean, I do agree with Kuchia that I'm not sure Payol was Poland's best player in the Euros. I think Padilla especially, I think, was very good coming through. So there's maybe one or two Polish players that are coming through that maybe were a little bit better. But again, it's quality you've got around you. And as you mentioned at Barcelona, she's absolutely nailed it. And I think herein lies the big issue, really, when it comes to this list. But I think most of us have agreed that Bon Mati should probably not be getting this. But it's been really interesting hearing, obviously, with England winning the Euros, there's been so many calls that Chloe Kelly should have been on the list. And I struggle. Like Chloe Kelly, I said this on Wednesday, Chloe Kelly for me is a player who spent, again, in that window of time, half the season on the bench effectively because Man City didn't want to play her. And yes, the comeback story is pretty good, but you can't give it to someone for, it's not even half a season. It's really for the last few months where she helped Arsenal to win a Champions League. And, you know, she was a substitute for England as well, who was relied on to come on and score penalties and last minute winners. So I don't think you can give someone the best player of the year when that's what's happening. The same with Alessia Russo. You know, there's no doubt they've had a fantastic season, but she was the golden boot, having scored the exact same number of goals that Bunny Shaw had scored in half a season. So I think those names are going to be a bit tricky. I don't see Leah Williamson being in that list either, really. I think if there's going to be an English player who's got a shout at it, it's Hannah Hampton, but goalkeepers don't tend to get Ballon d'Ors, and for that reason, it's probably going to be somebody else. I would tend to agree with what you've all said. I didn't mention Lucy Bronze, but that's because she shouldn't have. She did bloody well to play with a broken leg. But for me, I think Spanish-wise, you probably are looking at one of them winning it. And I think if you were going to choose a Spanish player who did do well at the Euros, you're looking at Putellas without a doubt. She had the most goal contributions on that one. So it would probably need to be her. But it is a very good list, and you're absolutely right. Eva Pahor has got superb numbers for the year, and these are the things that get completely looked over for these people that have done well at the Euros, for example, or having won the Champions League. And it's just a shame that an entire season's worth of possible data all comes down to whether or not you won the Champions League or the Euros or the World Cup, if that happens to be on that year as well. And maybe that is part of the reason why the Ballon d'Or isn't worth the mess it's printed on sometimes. But there we go. We have just spent a good 45 minutes arguing about it, so it better be worth it, is what we would say there. Well, guys, we haven't heard from Erling. I'm going to presume that's because of the fact that he's had 17 shots. He's currently lying under the table somewhere. Bless him, having struggled a little bit. I do just want to point out, because I did star this earlier on. Yes, of course, we're going to speak about the Europa Cup when it comes around as well. We will include that within our conversations for sure. We'll be keeping our eye on all of it over here. And yes, I mean, yes, lots of them did. I think this is the big issue. People are talking about games, like individual games over the course of 3 weeks, and you can't give somebody an award for a couple of games, or not give them an award for a couple of games in just that one tournament. I think that is a little bit on the harsh side. You've got to elongate what you're looking at. Rob, anything else you'd like to add on what we've spoken about tonight? And if not, where can people find more of your work, my good man?
Only thing I will add, and I'm not sure if I've just completely missed it, but is there a trophy of when they do the Puskas Award? Is it the Puskas? Yeah, it's the Puskas. Do they do? Yeah, the goal of the year. Do they do a women's equivalent of that, or they just include them in it nowadays? Because personally, I'd like to see that being split from men and women, purely to give a chance for a women's player to win it.
Don't they have the Martyr Award?
Yeah, I'm about to say they may have brought one in. I've missed out on what exactly it is nowadays. Is that part of the Ballon d'Or sector though? Isn't that separate?
Yes. But I'll be honest, I don't think that was released on that day, was it? I haven't seen anything about it.
That's what I was saying. I just apologies, I just completely missed it completely. But
no, on this case, your VAR is justified and correct.
And also, can I just say, with Monster Tome being sacked, I'm very sad to say we'll no longer get diary updates on social media. Been one of my highlights of the summer.
Well, there we go. Where can people find you, Robert?
You can find me at journalism_RP on X.
Liberty, same for you, my friend. Where can people find you, and anything you'd like to add on?
It's not about today's current session.
Okay.
But it is football related, I promise. But I just want to note, because I think it's important that we briefly mention it, that the situation currently happening with Barcelona Femení is disgraceful, and the fact that they are now they are actively down to 18 first team players, could be down to 17 by the end of the week if London City Lionesses do complete a deal for Yana Fernandez, is disgraceful because of the men's team. What is happening is basically there's €1 million, that Barcelona have to come down by to abide by fair play rules, because they've messed up their men's team. And basically everyone is being punished for it but the men. And they are losing players left, right and centre, and they will almost definitely be down to 17 first team players by the end of the week, which is disgraceful. That should never happen, and in no way should men's mistakes on the men's side of football mean punishment for the women's side, Barcelona Femení were the only profitable side of Barcelona for many years, and they should not be punished because of men's mistakes. And I think it's important because it is happening, like quite literally right now, for it to be mentioned, and I think it's disgraceful. But other than that, everything's just Liberty Simons, my name. And yeah, I will.
You bring that up because it could well be another talking point for another show for sure. Because I was speaking to Connor about this actually the other day. It does start to beg the question: are we in a situation where clubs do need to allow their women's team almost to be bought out in order to allow for the women's team to be run and cared about by people that are actually investing solely in it rather than almost as a side hustle because they feel like they have to. So definitely a good thing to potentially bring up on another show. I'm going to jot that down whilst you tell people where they could hear your wonderful voice if they wanted to, or indeed read your wonderful words, whichever you prefer.
You could all find me at Liberty Simons, and I have too many things to say, so prepare for your own risk. But if you are a United fan, maybe follow me because of potentially facing Hammarby soon. I have lots of things to say about them. That's up to 18. Thank you, Rob. But I also talk about European football at large, more casually the NWCL. Last night's game was incredible between the Portland Thorns and Seattle Reign. If you missed it, watch the highlights. Derby game with 6 goals. It was incredible. And yeah, I just have lots to say and I don't really shut up. So prevail at your own risk because I can get quite annoying. But yeah, mainly European stuff. That's almost all that I talk about. And once the WSL is back, I'll also talk about that too because I am here in England.
There we go. And that ability for all three of our guests is why it's been a show that's lasted an hour and 52 minutes when I thought it was only going to last 60. So it's been an incredible show in terms of getting everybody in. And as the question has been asked, yes, I believe they have got rid of their coach. And I'm not sure if they've got a new one as yet, but I did see that doing the rounds on Twitter. So yes, they have probably needed to be honest with you, because I don't think she was quite doing the business for them. So there we go. Yes, right. Well, there we are. That has been a cracker. Next week, I'm not entirely sure. We might be looking at the WSL, or maybe we'll be looking into Liberty's brilliant idea of discussing whether or not clubs should be selling out. We might need to get Rob back on for that one because obviously, as we know, Chelsea have indeed done that. But there we go. They do have a new coach. There we go. Internal appointment with little experience at the top level. Sounds like a great choice. There we go. So brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Hopefully, you've gone away from today knowing everything there is to know about the Champions League, understanding what the hell the Europa Cup is all about. You understood it is the Europa Cup and not the Europa League. And you have realised that no matter what happens, nobody is ever going to agree as to who should win the Ballon d'Or, who's the coach of the year, who's the club of the year. It's never going to happen. So just have your own opinion. It's all very good. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.